Okay, last week, week 4 of Activate Math. Let's go over the answers. Okay, first one talks about finding the slope of a parallel line. Before we can think about the parallel line, we've got to find the slope of the line they give us. And it kind of depends on what you remember. This one's in standard form. Standard form is considered AX plus BY is equal to C, where A, B, and C are numbers, constants, coefficients. So when you look at this, the formula for slope is to do negative A over B. And if you know that, you could go ahead and write down that you know the slope is negative 8 over 9. So that's one way to get the slope of that line. I'm betting most of you don't remember that and you didn't do it that way. So I'm going to show you another way in a second. But if I know the slope of the line they give me is negative 8/9, if I want the slope of the parallel line, parallel lines have the same slope. But think about it, if you want them to go the same direction, they have to be sloped exactly the same amount. So the answer will be negative 8/9. If you didn't remember that rule, you probably changed it into y equals mx plus b, because you can see the slope so easily in that form. And if you did that, you'd have to move the 8x over. So you would have 9y equals, you can't combine these because they're not like terms, so that would be negative 8x plus 3. And then we'd have to divide every piece by 9, or divide both sides by 9, depending on how you like to write it. So y would equal negative 8/9 x plus 1/3. So your slope is always right there in front of your x in that form. So some of you may have done it that way to find the slope, and then your parallel slope would be the same. This one talks about using the midpoint formula, which is super easy, but if you don't remember the midpoint formula, you could at least graph it. I'm going to start with midpoint formula. We have 3, 6, and 9, 4. And remember, midpoint is the middle of those two endpoints. It's exactly in the middle. So the midpoint formula is x plus x over 2, y plus y over 2. You're just averaging the points together. So I'm going to take both of my x's, and I'm going to average them. 3 plus 9, and then I have 2 of them, so I divide by 2. Do the same thing for my y's. 6 plus 4 divided by 2. And when I do that in my calculator, 3 plus 9 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 plus 4 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So my midpoint would be 6, 5. If you didn't remember the formula, and this is not the time for your OCD to kick in, you have 60 questions in 60 minutes. So you don't need a beautiful graph. All you need to do is kind of sketch it. If I have the point 3, 6, let's say that's about here. So we'll say that's about 3. And that's about 6. So if I want to do 9, 4, 9 would be further out. 4 would be a little lower. So there's 3, 6, and 9, 4. My midpoint would be somewhere in between there. And if you look at your answer choices, there's no way this is 3, 1 or 3, negative 1. And there's no way that it's all the way over here at 12, 10. So you know it's either 6, 2 or 6, 5 because it has to be in the middle of here. It also has to be in between their height, so it has to be between 4 and 6. So it has to be D. So just by sketching a picture, you could get to your answer if you don't remember your formula. Okay, when y equals x squared, what is negative y? So think about what you do to one side of an equation, you have to do the other. If I multiply this side by negative, I must multiply this side by negative. And you can see that I multiply the whole thing by negative. These just don't make sense at all. There's no reason that squared would go away when you multiply by negative, and there's no reason it would only go to the exponent. So when you choose between f and g, if I make one whole side negative, I have to make the whole other side negative. So that would be this right here. Okay, if I have h of x and it gives me that formula, it wants h of negative 3. So that means they want me to take negative 3 and plug it in for x. So I'll have 4 times negative 3 squared minus 5 times negative 3. Notice I use parentheses. Anytime you plug in, especially if there are exponents, always use parentheses. Otherwise your calculator won't square the negative and you'll get the wrong answer. So when you punch this in your calculator, if you have a graphing calculator, you can punch it all at once. Make sure you use the parentheses and you'll get 51. Okay, negative 3 squared is positive 9. So that's 4 times 9. Negative 5 times a negative 3 is a positive 15. So 4 times 9 is 36. 36 and 15 is 51. And if you had a graphing calculator, you just punch it in all at once. But make sure you use parentheses on things like that. All right, last one. This is a geometry rule. It talks about on this picture that XZ is bigger than YZ. So just for fun, let's say this one's 10 and this one's 8, just so we can remember which one's bigger. So if XZ is bigger than YZ, the sides across from the angles, so for example, angle Y is across from XZ. Think about making XZ smaller. The smaller XZ gets, the smaller angle Y would get. The bigger XZ gets, the bigger angle Y would be. So there's a relationship between the angle that's across from that side. So if we look at the 8, side YZ, switch colors. When you're looking at side YZ, it's across from angle X. So that's why they're talking about angle X and angle Y down here. The bigger the side, the bigger the angle. The smaller the side, the smaller the angle. So if I know that 10, or sorry, not 10, but if I know if XZ is always bigger than YZ, that must mean that angle Y is always bigger than angle X. Or angle X is always smaller than angle Y, which is what it says in F. Okay, and here's your answers again if you need to take a look at those.